Okay, welcome to week 13, where finally we have kind of the grand finale where we talk about classes in detail. Now, we've talked about classes a lot already, but we're going to talk about them more formally this time, and basically you're going to learn to create your own class, and that way, of course, you'll understand it much more clearly. Okay, so VB is one of many languages which is called an object-oriented programming language. And sometimes that they abbreviate it as OOP. OOP is short for object-oriented programming. And we've seen that when we look at classes or when we look at functions, we basically try to separate the code into pieces. That's what making a function does, or that's also what making a class does. And before VB.NET, so there used to be just Visual Basic, now it's called Visual Basic.NET, but it wasn't OOP. It wasn't object-oriented programming, but now it is. Most languages now are object-oriented programming languages, like Java and C# and C++ and so on. So they say that just when you make a form, you probably notice that this was there. In other words, let's see. So if I have a form here, I think I have a form. So if I look at this form, if I click on this here, I can see that at the very top is the word class. So it's actually a class that's been created here. He says the word public means that other code can see it. And form1 is the name of the class, and at the bottom of it there's the end class. And so that's the end of the code for the class. He says when you put a button or a text box on the form, you're really adding it to the form class. So you can see that here I have a button in there, so it's part of the form class. Now he says when you start the form, in other words when you do this, when you click up here to start it, and you get this, VB does something called instantiation. In other words, it goes from having a class, which is the code, to creating an actual object. So this basically means that the form is being turned into an object, or the class is being turned into an object. And all the things needed for creation of the form are being set up for you. Your controls are being added, your variables are being set up and initialized. Set up means declared, initialized means given a value to them. And he says that's the basic difference between a class and an object. A class is the code, or the code itself, and the code becomes an object when you start using it. He says that Net Framework is something that Microsoft has invested a lot of time, effort, and money into creating. It's big, it's very big. And with the .NET Framework, many languages can use the .NET Framework. Many, basically Microsoft languages can use it. He says the Net Framework is basically just a lot of classes, a whole lot of classes. And they're organized in what are called namespaces. That's just a way of organizing the classes. He says there's also something called the Common Language Runtime, which we've talked about. A runtime is the thing that gets your code to actually run on the computer. So it's part, some program basically that's running in the background that makes the code run on the computer. Okay, you can read a little bit more about that here, and also something called the intermediate language, but we won't go into these. So he says a namespace is a collection of classes, namespaces. A namespace is a collection of classes which are grouped together. So we have something like this. I think we've seen that before. System.io, or we've seen something similar, and that's a namespace. that's used actually for inputting and outputting stuff. So if you want to write a file or read a file or something like that, you use it. Here's another namespace that I think we've definitely seen this. In fact, you couldn't create your forms without this namespace. But again, this part here, yeah, is just a group of classes. So it's just a way of grouping classes together. So he says a group of classes huddling under the same umbrella. Then he says system itself is a namespace. So this is itself a namespace. It's called a top-level namespace. Think of it as the leader of the hierarchy. So I think of a namespaces like this. So this is like, where do I live? Well, I live in Japan. And which part of Japan do I live in? Well, I live in Oita-ken. And which city do I live in? I live in Beppu. And then this is me. I'm the object. So this is the object, and these are the locations where this object is stored or located. He calls this the leader. So a different analogy would be to say this is the leader, and this is like just under the leader, and this is under that leader, and so on. Like leader, like in the army. So this might be the general, and then whoever is under the general, and then whoever under him, and so on. And the dot notation is used to separate each group of classes. So this is a group, and then this is a group inside that first group, and so on. So this is the same set of groups, but this is a different object, or a different class rather. This is the button class, and this is also the same set of what did I say? The same set of the same namespace, but this is a different class. Okay? But it's in the same namespace. It's in the forms namespace, and buttons are also in the forms namespace. So they're all part of the forms namespace, as is form itself. So here's where he says it's like a hierarchy, the leader of a hierarchy rather. So system, though, it's like an army. He says you have a private, so this is the private, and then you have a sergeant above the private, so this is the sergeant, and this would be the captain here, something like that. But he says you have to follow this chain, or otherwise you'll get errors and you'll get problems. And he says you can see this chain every time you type a full stop. By the way, when he says type a full stop, he means type a period, or type a dot. Because when you type the dot, you see a pop-up box appear, and you can see, what elements are at that level. So he says take, but sometimes you don't have to type the full kind of address here, because if you have this at the beginning, then you don't have to type the whole thing. So he says this means that you don't have to keep typing the full chain of command every time you want to access a button on the form. This chain of command is inherited whenever you create a new VB.NET form. So actually this is there, so you don't have to do this whole thing when you want to access a form or a button or something like that, right? We don't write this. We just write button 1 dot something or another. There are plenty of times when a chain of command is not inherited, though. In that case, you do have to type it all out. And he says that earlier they had to type it out here. Now I don't know. I don't think we went through this example, but it's in his website, so you can check it. But anyway, sometimes you have to type the whole thing out. So here, the IO namespace is not inherited when you created a new form, so you have to tell VB where it's located, and so you have to type it out. he says whenever you have something like this, really, this is much longer than just button 1. There's a whole inherited namespace that goes along with that, but it's just, you don't have to type it out. So he says whenever you access a property or method of a control, just remember that that rather long chain of command is actually there. Okay, in the next video we're going to talk about creating our own classes. So I'll stop here. Now as we proceed with this creating a class, you're supposed to turn this in, so you have to do it yourself as well.